Intel taking a step up into the GPU market where no one else is stepping up to the plate. Plus, let's react a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about that PlayStation Store shutting down for PSP, Vita, and PS3. All of that and more on the Tech Summit Podcast, episode 41. I'm
I
Chris.
am Francisco.
And we
And
are still doing this remotely for one more episode. One more. This is the last one. Thankfully, I can thankfully say that.
that's a
Um,
promise.
but of course, while I am not there, what is always going to be there is the social media at the bottom of the video.
And that's right. If you're listening on other platforms such as Anchor, Spotify, and the likes, do make sure to check out the description of either episode on either app. And also, I wanted to bring up just something very quickly. Recently, a friend of mine opened up a shop called Little Starry Things Online, where she sells a bunch of little plushies just like this. And I've actually got a little octopus that I absolutely love. Though this isn't the only thing that she offers. There are going to be a lot of really cool plushies and stickers that you can get. And now, like, this is essentially just like a shout out, a friendly shout out. And I would very much appreciate it if you went ahead and check that out. If you're watching on YouTube, do make sure to take a look at the description for that link. And also, if you are listening on other platforms, do remember to visit Little Starry Things. And you should be able to find whatever you need right there.
I'm looking at the website right now because obviously I'm not there, so I can't see the plushies in person. But I'm looking online, and this is some adorable stuff.
It is,
Definitely
isn't
check
it?
these things out, guys.
Yeah. I was even taking a look the other day, and she seems to have like uh, a lot of like cupcakes and ice cream and things like that. And it's like, wow, this does look pretty nice. I would love to have this stuff on my keychain. I've had this octopus actually for quite some time, and it's been my best friend, my only companion through this all.
Very nice stuff. And,
For
yeah,
sure.
thank you for more or less basically sponsoring the Tech Summit podcast, essentially. Thank you very much. Everyone, please check that stuff out.
And
And, with that, Francisco, you have some news for us, don't you?
indeed. So we're going to start off actually with some Intel news, and this is actually very recent. So, do you guys remember that, well, Intel and rumors have been going hand in hand for quite some time, but in this case, these have lasted quite a while since rumors around an Intel GPU have been circulating for quite some time. And now it looks like something is actually coming to fruition, and it couldn't be at a better time. So I'm currently on PCGamer.com. The article is titled Intel's DG2 gaming GPUs could actually stand the chance against Nvidia and AMD. And this article was written by Jacob Ridley. Because I play Super Smash Bros., I know how to pronounce your last name. So, with that said, uh, it appears. Stop
You
laughing.
say that, and it's gonna be because actually it's pronounced rightly, and then you're gonna be completely wrong.
Oh, dude, that would be so awkward. No one correct me in the comments, please. I'm very sensitive to criticism. Intel DG2 GPUs are set to become the first gaming graphics card spun out of the Intel Xe HPG yarn, something that is promised to be the basis for many competitive GPUs from the chip-making Goliath. It's all set to kick off later this year on a yet-to-be-disclosed time and date, where we'll see Intel put its best foot forward in hopes to heave open the hydraulic grip of NVIDIA and AMD over gaming GPUs. So, all that I'm really reading here is just that we will no longer, well, if this ends up working out, we will no longer have to depend on NVIDIA and AMD making good graphics cards, making good upgrades. Like, there aren't just going to be two major companies competing with each other. There's going to be a third one thrown into the mix. So, like, essentially, Sony versus Microsoft versus Nintendo. Now it's going to be NVIDIA versus AMD versus Intel, which is going to be pretty awesome. And I think that Intel is probably the ideal company to start jumping into this since AMD already manufactures their own CPUs and they've been doing very well in that regard. I use a Ryzen CPU on my own system. I know that you do as well, Christopher. Uh,
Yes.
so seeing that Intel is now working on a gaming GPU that is set to rival the RTX 3070, which even though there has actually been a lot more demand from what I have seen for the RTX 3060, like you would be surprised to see just how many people want a 3060. Mostly because of that price point, but also because it is still a pretty significant upgrade from something like a 1060, which a lot of people still have.
So what I'm trying to sort of figure out and think about in my head is like, at least I want your thoughts on this. Do you think Intel entering the market would actually like work out? Do you think the cards could even like match the quality? Because obviously, okay, the reason why everyone seems to be relatively excited about this stuff seems to not really be a matter of, oh, Intel's going to mop the floor with NVIDIA and AMD. It's more, oh, Intel cards will actually be available compared to AMD and NVIDIA,
Yeah.
which, let's be real here, no, they won't. Um, they won't. NVIDIA and AMD here's what it is. NVIDIA was the first one to really be scalped.
Yes.
There's obviously reasons for that. AMD ended up getting scalped because all of the NVIDIA cards were gone, so everyone was turning to AMD,
Yeah.
right? So what's stopping Intel from being scalped because now they're the next option? Like, it's just a chain. It's a chain reaction.
That is unfortunately a problem that I don't see any kind of solution for anytime soon because uh, there is just like a global chip shortage of semiconductors as well, and that is causing a lot of these stock issues. In spite of scalpers and miners and things like that, all of these graphics cards have just been sold out, and it is just a lot more difficult to manufacture. So like whatever Intel happens to have in hand, or whatever they can actually get their hands on, um, honestly, don't be surprised if it is priced pretty highly because Intel does tend to do that. Like there isn't much of like a good value Intel CPU unless uh I don't know. I guess that the best way to word it is really just that Ryzen is a better value than Intel for the most part. And it is usually because they tend to be cheaper, but they tend to offer a little bit more for the price as well. Even though Intel uh, does excel in some regards. Like when it comes to clock speed, I believe that they're still ahead of the game here. And I think
Yes, and that's what I think. I think it depends. Like when it comes to Ryzen versus Intel card CPUs, excuse me. It really just came down to like what you really what are you using it for? Do you value multiple cores or single core clock speed? And if that's when you sort of try to figure out what exactly you needed. Because before I went with my Ryzen CPU, for the longest time, people were recommending me to go with Intel, i9s, for example. Like, it was recommended for me to go with that because the single core clock speed meant that I could do more active time performance when it comes to 3D, work.
Yeah, I'm very much glad that you didn't go in that direction though, because here's the thing when it comes to Intel chips and the like. Uh, Intel does tend to make new sockets for their CPUs more frequently than AMD does. Like in this case, we have had the exact same AM4 socket type for Ryzen CPUs for what is now 4 years, coming into 5 years. I don't think that there's a new socket size or type planned at this time, which is good, which means that let's say that right now we have a 3950X. Let's say that this year they, I mean, like, let's pretend that they will probably be able to release a new CPU and they might come out with a 6950X. Um, uh, Assuming that it is going to still use AM4, which is the same socket type that even the Ryzen 1000 series we're using, this is still going to be pretty awesome. Like it's going to be pretty easy for you to be able to upgrade that CPU as long as you can just afford that CPU. You don't have to upgrade your motherboard as well, which is
That
oftentimes what I find myself having to do with Intel CPUs.
that is awesome, and, if I really am the kind of person to be on the cutting edge there, that it just seems like a great thing. Personally, I don't know if I'm really gonna be doing that, at least for now, if only just because I'm very, like, penny pinching with my money, especially right now. Um
You definitely would not need an upgrade. Like your 3950X will last you quite a while. That is a monster CPU, so don't worry
It
about
is.
it.
It just depends on, I guess, how much of a performance leap it is. I did end up missing out on the 5950X, which was what I would have preferred to get.
Yeah,
If it turns out that a theoretical 6950X turned out to be like double the power of what I currently have, that becomes extremely tempting.
That's highly unlikely because CPUs don't tend to advance that quickly, unlike GPUs. Like GPUs do tend to advance that quickly, even though like it might take a couple of years in between. But
Right.
but for a CPU to be like double the speed of like a previous gen, it would have to be like a good few generations before that, and technology would have really like it would just have to be, I don't know, like how would I say it? Like it's just a much slower growing process when it comes to CPU growth and CPU improvements versus something like a GPU.
Right, right.
Yeah. But
I mean,
either way, this is going to be pretty cool in my opinion because there are going to be graphics cards available for 2 seconds at least. So people are going to get a 2 second window to try and buy one.
it's extremely interesting. I'm also just very interested to see how Intel performs because, of course, Intel does kind of have that moniker of sorts in the GPU market of being, the cheapo integrated option. Whenever you got those like pre-built desktops or a laptop that has Intel HD 4000 series, you just kind of rolled your eyes a little bit. It's like, oh,
Y-
okay.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, like you usually with those, like integrated graphics is always like just a graphics engine that is inside of the processor. So, like for instance, the 4790K, which is a pretty old CPU at this point, that was a Core i7. That one had integrated graphics. So, like technically, if you wanted to use a computer that you just built and you don't have a graphics card, but you do have that chip, then you would just connect your HDMI cable onto your motherboard, and you be able to use the integrated graphics from your CPU.
Right.
Yeah, it's not like a separate card or anything like that, but this time it is going to be a separate card, which is pretty exciting to see. Though, admittedly, I am saying this because there's just a massive shortage right now, like when it comes to cards, and the fact that no one's probably going to be able to get anything this year.
That's kind of the thing. It's a little hard to get really excited about this stuff because like the only people who are gonna get their hands on these cards is like Linus and other tech YouTubers, and they're gonna like do some funky stuff, like combine four of them together to see what happens, and it's like that's nice.
All of them
Wish I could
sent by
have one.
Intel. Yeah, right. It's like they sent Linus 4. Now granted, we're just joking around here. Uh, I wish that I were at that status where like I could just start receiving graphics cards and stuff like that and actually be able
Maybe
to test these
someday.
things. Yeah, maybe one of these days, but still, like I do get that frustration of of reviewers getting one card, two cards, or multiple cards when there are consumers out there that are trying to get the card and they really can't. Like
So
paying
I'm not I'm,
customers.
I'm not really complaining about like tech reviewers getting these things because obviously, you do need to get a lot of people are going to want to see reviews
Yeah,
of like if the product is actually working. So I'm not like, sitting here being like rah rah, how dare Linus get all of the Nvidia cards.
agreed.
No, that's not what my issue is. My issue more is I'm just sort of, yeah, like you said, I'm making sort of jokes just about like they are guaranteed to get their card. Everyone else is a complete like crapshoot as to like, oh, can I beat the bots?
Yeah.
Or
And
can I make a bot that could beat them?
can I make a bot that can beat them?
It's Robot Wars. It's digital Robot Wars. You remember that show of like way back in the day?
I think so. Sounds familiar, but not particularly. And oh my goodness, I think I just ruined that reference for you. My sincerest of apologies.
Someone out there will get it.
Yes. And if you do, please make sure to comment down below. I would love to learn some more as well. Now, uh let's see how things end up going. This is set to come out at some point throughout like the end of this year, or at least like throughout the end of the second half of this year. So let's see how it ends up competing. Let's see how well it does in terms of compatibility with software and things of the like. Like, let's see just what Intel's first attempt in this regard is going to look like. I very much look forward to seeing it. I probably won't be able to get my hands on that, but that's okay. as long as I at least get to see what other people think about it.
Right.
Yeah. But with that said, that pretty much is going to conclude that segment regarding GPUs. That might
So,
bring a
do you think
glimmer
we're
of hope.
gonna wait? Just one more thing. Do you
Sure.
think we're gonna have to start making like an Intel shame button?
An Intel shame button? Let's wait until that day. But
We don't even have an AMD one yet. Just realized that.
yeah, that is true. Maybe that shows our own bias. Huh.
Oh no.
Okay, we have to go ahead and fix that. And I guess we also need a PlayStation shame corner. We're
No, I don't know about that.
is that so? Really? Because after this next piece of news, you might agree with me.
So, okay, yeah, let's talk about that. It came out a couple weeks ago. We weren't able to talk about it yet because we went on hiatus, and then last episode we were kind of loaded with new stuff. So
Yes.
this is going to be a conversation that is going to sort of last for a little bit. So let's talk about this real quick. So after a few weeks of rumors, it was confirmed that Sony is in fact shutting down the PlayStation Store on the PS3, the Vita, and the PSP sometime this summer. I believe it was June or July for PSP and PS3, and then August for the Vita. I'll double check on that. And yeah, people are up in arms because there's a lot of digital only titles for these systems that will essentially be forever lost as a result of this shutdown. And so it's kind of just like, what do you do,
Yeah. I can relate to that kind of frustration, especially since, I mean, it's not the easiest thing to do to find like a physical copy of a PlayStation 3 game that you might want. Um, and something that's honestly pretty important too, is that I read this comment and this one person did bring up a very important point here. But I read this comment where this guy brought up the fact that like in a lot of places in South America and things like that, where we're getting a PlayStation 4, then might not even be like much of an option for it, a lot of people. Um, let alone a PlayStation 5. Like all that they really might have access to is a PlayStation 3. So them shutting down the store for them only makes it harder for people who may not be able to upgrade to even just a PlayStation 4.
And
And that's something that didn't even cross my mind until he brought it up, and I think he's absolutely right.
And you could even go in the opposite direction. If someone maybe sold their PS3 a while back and they have a PS4 or PS5, remember Sony more or less kind of ditched the idea of backwards compatibility between the 3 and 4. So like if you have a PS5, congratulations, you can play PS4 titles. You can't play any PS3 titles. So like because like one of the big things that Sony has tried to do to sort of soften the blow is say, no, no, don't worry, you could still download your purchased titles.
Yes, as long as you bought them first. So buy them now.
You could still download your purchased titles, but the problem is if you don't have a PS3 anymore, you can't really do that. And of course, other people, a lot of people out there are going to be like, "Oh, just go buy a PS3." But like, you shouldn't really have to do that. These things should be backwards compatible. It's just kind of interesting because Microsoft has backwards compatibility stretching way far back. An Xbox One can play as far back as an original Xbox, and I imagine with the Series X, they're going to be working on that too. Like,
Yeah.
the Series X will probably be able to play something from every single Xbox ever made. And with Sony, that's not the case. PS5 can play PS4 titles, and that's kind of it. 1, 2, and 3, no, nothing.
Yeah, I mean it's helpful that they do let you play PlayStation 4 titles, and it is like just about every PlayStation 4 title out there. And if you bought any on the PlayStation 4 store, then you can play them on the PlayStation 5. All of that sounds great, of course, but then there are some great gems from the PlayStation 3 era, and it doesn't even feel like it was that long ago, which is kind of the funny thing.
And again, and of course, we have the other topic, the more philosophical topic of games preservation. A
Yes.
lot of people are very like, gaming historians more or less. They're very into the idea of preserving games just for the sake of history, the same way how we've had like the National Archives for preserving movies or music, for all time. there's not really anything like that for games, and there's this sort of like cynicism where if a certain system, like in this case the PS3's online store, if it's not profitable for Sony, they'll just pull the plug regardless of gaming preservation. Gaming preservation be damned, they're not making any money off of it anymore, so why bother? And that does kind of come off like oh, very disappointing. A lot of exclusive titles that could just be lost to history.
Yeah. Remember the day that Mario died? A lot of people felt that way.
Yeah, you
Even
have
Nintendo
that,
selling
but even
titles.
even then though, even then though, Mario 64, you could still buy a physical copy. Sunshine, you could still get a physical copy. Expensive, albeit, but you could still do it. Same thing with Galaxy. Let's talk about a game like, say, Tokyo Jungle, which has always been regarded as a popular niche PS3 title. That's digital exclusive. Like, there were a limited run of physical copies, but they're extremely expensive now.
Mhm.
Tokyo Jungle would be lost essentially. Ratchet and Clank Future Quest for Booty was a digital exclusive. Remember those old Ratchet and Clank titles? Quest for Booty, Up Your Arsenal.
Yes, I do. I do remember them.
Uh,
The
let's use
memories.
this one. Let's use this title, a JRPG for Francisco, to sort of appeal to Francisco here. Suikoden 2. Which costs like $200 for a physical copy on PS1, but was only $10 on the PSN store for PS3.
Huh. Y
It's like,
you don't want to end up losing that game now, do you?
and of course, yeah, and this is nothing to say of all of the digital titles that were exclusively for the PS3. And then, let's talk about the system that you and I imagine hold near and dear to our hearts that we're very frustrated about, the Vita,
Yep.
which isn't even 10 years old yet,
No.
and is going to have its digital store completely wiped off the face of the earth. And keep in mind, with the Vita having sold the way that it did and Sony dropping support for it like an ugly baby, a lot of the Vita's library is digital exclusive.
Wait, I thought that the Vita did not sell all that well, really, at least in comparison to the 3DS. Isn't
So
that the
what happened
case?
is the Vita did not sell very well, but a big reason why is because Sony dropped support for it pretty early on.
Wow. Like, how
I
early
think
on
the
are we
they
talking?
only sup they only supported the Vita for maybe 1 or 2 years in terms of first party support, and then just kinda dropped it, and it ended up becoming a machine full of JRPGs and indie titles, which, of course,
I
for the Western market, does nothing for them. Over in
I
Japan, the Vita sold really well. The Vita is still popular over there, or at least it was for a while until the Switch came around. The Vita to this day, the Vita apparently has bigger gaming shelves in game stores over there than the Xbox does. Just
you kn
because the Xbox notoriously sells very poorly over there, while the Vita had really strong support.
Yeah, and then, like,
But
on the
nevertheless,
opposite end over
you
here,
know,
the Xbox sells
but
considerably
nevertheless,
better.
that means the Vita gets a lot of, JRPGs. It gets a lot of visual novels. And, those games can get physical copies in Japan because, of course, they're popular over there.
Yeah,
They're usually not popular enough in the West to justify getting physical copies. So they'll come
exactly,
out as digital exclusives. All of those
exactly.
games are going to be lost now with the store shutting down.
Yeah, you do have a
Nothing to
very
say of
good
the
point.
indie titles.
Yes, and like, not to mention too, another big issue regarding that is that the prices for Vita storage hasn't really gotten much cheaper, if at all. Like, I'm not sure if you have like looked around, even at 16 gigabyte cards for the Vita, they tend to be very expensive still.
Hmm.
So like, it's not even like cost effective to just get yourself a bigger proprietary storage for your Vita to try and download these games, because like, it is just going to be pretty expensive to try and preserve these unless you already have a massive memory card for these, or unless you ended up going the route that some people have gone with the Vita, and that is to hack it so that it can accept micro SD cards instead.
I'm going to contend as well that like the proprietary SD card baloney. Um, is one of the reasons why the Vita failed. Like Sony basically set this system up for failure. I'm going to argue that till my dying breath. The system could have been a success, but Sony set it up for failure and had the surprised Pikachu face when it failed.
Yeah.
And then you had the gall. You had people out there who had the gall to talk about a Vita 2. No, no. If this is how Sony is going to support their handhelds, I do not want to see them try another one. I don't.
I see your point there. I would. You, I'm kind of
I,
on the other side of things where I would actually be kind of happy to see a Vita 2, but also maybe instead of that, why not just bring any kind of games that they would have been planning to put on a Vita 2, just bring them over to the Switch instead. And I think I would prefer that.
That's more or less where I think a lot of the developers have gone. Like a lot of those visual novels and JRPGs that would come out for the Vita are going to Switch instead.
Yes. Yeah.
Again, as digital exclusives here in the West, at least.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and yeah, a lot of them have moved on to the Switch because the Switch basically does feel like a spiritual successor. I know it's a different company, but
Right.
it basically just feels like the Vita, but more popular.
Yeah. And it also
And then
feels
of
like the
course,
3DS, but
and of
more
course
popular.
on Sony's front, a lot of those Vita titles that may have come out for the Vita ended up coming out to PS4 instead, like Gravity Rush 2, for example.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like there's a.
Sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Oh no, no, no worries. Earlier I was just trying to say that yeah, uh, I mean the Switch not only replaced the Vita for a lot of people, it did replace the 3DS for a lot of people.
Yeah, I remember when Nintendo first came out with the Switch saying, "No, no, 3DS has a lot of life in it. It's going to be a companion piece. It's not replacing the 3DS. It replaced the 3DS."
Lies. I I know they lied straight to our faces. I can't believe it.
It's the same deal as when the original DS first came out, saying, "No, no, no, it's going to be a companion to the Game Boy Advance. It's not replacing it."
It's going to be, but it's backwards compatible with the Game Boy Advance. So,
Yeah,
is it really
yeah.
a companion piece? No.
It feels very much like they were saying, at least with the original DS, they said that just to cover themselves, just in case the DS did fail, and just be like, "No, no, it's okay. That was a side piece. Let's go back to the Game Boy,
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
the
oh
Game
man.
Boy Micro 2 or something." It's
Nintendo can be so funny sometimes when it comes to these things. Uh, but
They are,
yeah.
but Sony, this is not very funny.
No, yes, like with Sony, pitchforks, and when it comes to Nintendo, it's like, haha, you little filthy liars. And then,
Game preservation is just important, I think. I'm not some big gaming historian, but I do think, yeah, you should try to preserve games wherever you can. There are people out there who are trying with means that we are probably not going to discuss on this episode, but
yeah, because there just isn't really enough time. However, I have to say that because of a lot of these companies not giving much of a thought to game preservation, or at the very least, when they do attempt it, it does appear to be kind of like taking advantage of the community that does want to play these older games. They end up resorting to other means, and then these companies complain about that later.
Nintendo.
Nintendo, in particular, is very stringent on that.
That's the thing. We're talking backwards compatibility stuff over here.
Mhm.
Microsoft has full on backwards compatibility going all the way to the original Xbox. Sony doesn't really seem to take backwards compatibility very seriously besides PS4 to PS5. And Nintendo has opted to just nickel and dime you for 30-year-old games. Going on 40-year-olds in some cases at this point.
Yeah, and like it's not even like a vast selection of them. It's like highly targeted, cherry picked titles that you probably don't really care so much about, which is
Oh,
unfortunate.
also, just want to cover our bases here.
Yep.
Because I know someone out there, I know there's possibly someone out there who's probably screaming at their computer or their phone thinking, but PS3 compatibility is hard because cell architecture and it's like, okay, um, I understand that the cell architecture of a PS3 makes it very difficult to emulate and develop games for. There's a reason why Metal Gear Solid 4 has not been ported anywhere else to this day. Um, To that, however, I will say that there are people, fans, who are working on PS3 emulation, and they're getting somewhere with it. I do not believe that Sony themselves can't figure it out. They just don't want to.
Speaking of PS3 emulation, though, I feel like before we get to that point, we need to be able to optimize PlayStation 2 emulation first. Because if you want to emulate PlayStation 2 games, you are stuck to a PC.
That's the other thing too. I really feel like there should be like easy access, easy ways to play classic PlayStation titles. PlayStation 2 nostalgia is going to be hitting us right around now. That 2000s nostalgia. You're
Yeah.
gonna have a lot of people waxing nostalgia about Jack and Daxter, for example.
I mean,
You know,
I was thinking
they're-
more so like Mortal Kombat Armageddon, but hey.
yeah, but because like the Crash Bandicoot nostalgia has come. It's still here, but I imagine it's gonna start to fade out a little bit. Even though for me, Crash is eternal. A lot of people are going to start moving on to remember Jack and Daxter? Man, that was cool. And then you got people pining for a Jack and Daxter remake, a trilogy remake or something.
The golden age of video games. Even though I can kind of agree that the PlayStation 2 was kind of like the golden age of video games.
I was more of a GameCube guy. Like I mean, I had my PS2 titles. I had my PS2. I love my PS2. But a lot of the games that I really enjoyed were on GameCube.
I mean, you know what I mean. It's like that same generation, I would say, because like the GameCube was part of the same generation as the PlayStation 2 and
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
original Xbox. Yeah, so like that's essentially what I'm referring to. I mean, the GameCube does have a lot of gems as well. I do remember Mario Party on it being a ton of fun. For instance, Super Mario Sunshine was actually a game that I didn't get to even touch up until recently, but I did know. Well, I did always want to play it.
Of
But I
course, there's
never got a
also
GameCube.
Melee, the game that isn't really nostalgic because they refuse to let it die.
Right, yeah. It is still alive to this day. People are making sure of that. But yeah, I would say that there is a lot of value in games preservation, and people would be willing to pay for these older games again if they were made available today.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people, they're not even complaining about like, oh, I have to pay for this game. They want to buy these games.
Yeah, people would
And
rather
Sony is
have it.
saying, nah, you can't anymore.
Yeah, like people would rather have it by official means rather than having to go through the whole process of emulating it and like potentially getting in trouble and things like that. People just want to, they just want to be able to relive these experiences, even if it does mean paying for it.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. It's a mess.
It
Sony.
is.
It's funny too because I will admit, I don't think I would have been thinking too much about this if Sony did not come and talk and say they're going to shut it down. And I wonder how many people are the same way that, they don't really care about the PSN store, but now that Sony says they're going to take it away, they're like, wait, hold on, no.
Yeah, it's
You
like we
know?
took it for granted this whole time.
You don't really know what you got till it's gone.
Exactly. And that definitely applies here. However, I would say that we have pretty much reached the end here because, well, this has been a very lively episode. And I think that there's still going to be a lot more to discuss in the coming weeks.
And it's going to be even more lively because, special announcement, I suppose, I already kind of said it earlier at the beginning, this is the last remote episode, at least hopefully for a while.
Indeed. Indeed. So now Christopher is going to be sitting right next to me. Again, after so long. After all this
Back
time.
in the studio.
Yep. Indeed. Man, it's been so long. Our lighting is going to be so even again. It's not going to have like that half-shadedness anymore. Because now
Gonna be
you're going to be here.
back in there. No more interrupting each other digitally because of the internet connection.
Yeah.
We
Now.
just interrupt each other in person.
Stole my joke. I can't believe it. Anyway, I guess that's just what we do at the Tech Summit podcast. Now, if you are watching on YouTube, do make sure to check out the social media that is right down here. And if you are listening on other platforms, do make sure to check out the description. But with that said, this has been Francisco.
And Chris.
And we will be seeing you all on the next episode for episode 42. Enjoy.
Thank you. Travel well. And good night. Good night. Travel well.